This is the Dungeon Master's Handbook.
Hi everyone, it's Michael, aka Chicago Wiz, and welcome to yet another in-car episode of the Dungeon Master's Handbook. I seem to do my best podcasting, or at least my most consistent podcasting, while I'm in the car, since I'm kind of a captive podcaster, captive broadcaster. I apologize for the sound quality, but I am not a professional podcaster, nor do I play one on the internet. So, yeah. So, it happened this past Sunday. I'm recording this on the 24th of May, as I go in for my working in the office hybrid. And on Sunday the 22nd, we did indeed play tabletop Dungeons and Dragons face-to-face after almost 2 years. According to my notes, the last time we played face-to-face was in February of 2020. This is literally almost a month before everything went to hell in a handbasket. And then the last game that we played as a group, it was remotely, was in May of 2020. And we picked it up on Sunday, and I gotta say, it was wonderful. It was really good to see my friends. A couple of them I had seen previously for a brief get-together, but we had 5 in-person and 1 remote, and I'll talk about the remote in a second. But it was good. I cooked a barbecue. I had a cookout, fired up the charcoal grill. We had burgers and dogs and little beer and drinks and chips. And really just great kind of talking about, how COVID had gone and what was happening and how we all felt. And yeah, it was great. I'm really thrilled that we've progressed on enough and have gotten through the pandemic enough that we're at a point where we can meet like this again. So we'll see. 3 things I wanted to cover about the restart. Item number 1, notes. Oh my Lord. I thought I was a good note taker. I have a wiki online, Etinerra, etinerra.com. I've got a wiki with notes and lore and things. I've got my players' journals when they write journals on that same website, and I've got saved off archives of my play-by-post game. I've got notebooks stored on my shelves in my gaming room. I keep notes on Google Docs. I thought I had it all together, but boy, let me tell you what. What I had to do was go back in time 2 years and try to recreate what was going on, where the players were, what they had done, what the major NPCs were, what their, motivations and goals were, what major decisions had been made, what major events had happened, and why. And I thought I had done a good job of that, but I really hadn't. It was a very frantic couple of days, and I'll tell you what I had to do. First was I had managed to keep a skeleton of the basics of what the players had been doing and why, and I had managed to keep a skeleton of the of what had gone on the previous call it, previous couple of years of gaming, I had kept a fairly, well, I'm going to call it inconsistent. I think that's really the word. I was inconsistent. Sometimes I was recording really well, really good notes. Sometimes I was not. And it was a little frustrating for me. I had to go through my notes, go through the game prep sheets that I had made, with the notes of things I wanted to do, and those I had put in online in Google Docs. I had to go to my players' journals, which really helped me to understand what they saw from their point of view so that I could take that into account. Put that all together into kind of a little timeline, and then go forward from that. And so I'm definitely going to be changing how I record notes in the future. Kind of with the idea of what information would I need to know if I have to pick up these notes 2 years from now and say, what the hell was I thinking? It'll help. And again, it's those points, what are the major players? How were they involved? What were they thinking? What were they doing? What's their goals? What major events happened? What major interactions were there? What decisions were made? Maybe a little bit about why they were made. Major events, questions that I need to answer, in between games or at the next game. Were there any rulings or issues that came up? And so on. So, yeah, stuff like that. The important things. And as much as I hated this 2-year pause, sometimes having to struggle with stuff like that is where I learned the most, and it helps me to prepare for the next time. So I don't know if this is useful for you, but maybe as you're thinking about what you're going to record during a game, maybe thinking about, how would I pick up the campaign 2 years from now, and do I have enough information? And one final thing that I'm trying to do is have a post-game kind of recap in my head. And that one's hard. I got done with the game on Sunday, and I was exhausted. And the funny thing is we really didn't play much. We more just kind of talked our way through things. The session worked out exactly as I had hoped. I presented them with, here's what you guys had done for the previous 2 years, going through this mega dungeon that I had prepared that fit into the campaign. Here's where we left off. And then we kind of talked through what was the likeliest outcome. And we even got to throw some dice, and I got to use a very old school approach to how did they survive exiting a dungeon where outside the dungeon there was pretty much a virtual army waiting for whoever had gone into the dungeon. I used an old chart that Jeff Rientz of Jeff's Game Blog had blogged about a long time ago, and I'll try to provide a link for that either in the show notes or maybe on my blog, chicagowiz-games.blogspot.com. That will be in the show notes, so you can look there for that. But this chart, he basically made it that if the players ended the game in the dungeon, or if they were not prepared to exit the dungeon, or for some reason they got stuck and they needed to throw dice to see, did they survive the dungeon, what happened? And it's a really interesting chart, full of shenanigans and lots of fun. And yes, one of my players got bit by the chart, and it was very fun to hear them construct that. Apparently they had a backpack full of oil, and one of the flasks broke, and then they got hit with a flaming arrow, and they were set afire, and they were running around trying to shed their belongings, and Now they have a kind of a crippling injury as a result of the burns. So good fun, good times, shenanigans and player misery. So yeah, so we made it through all that. So that was part of the session, and then we talked about where we were going to go from the future. And the players all seem pretty united in that they want to continue where they left off. They want to push on and achieve the goals that they had set, a couple of years ago, which is to find the MacGuffins, the artifacts, in order to take on the big baddies. So I've got my marching orders, so to speak. Which kind of brings me to the second point of 3 points that I wanted to talk about in today's podcast, which is including an online remote person into a game that had previously been just face-to-face. I think one of the things that the pandemic forced us all into, or probably the vast majority of us into, was the idea that we were no longer going to be tied down in our work and in our social gatherings to face-to-face, to the actual physical. I mean, Zoom and Google Meet and Skype and Teams and just what have you, all of those tools, I think really matured. And more importantly, I think we as people in society learned how to adapt and deal with that. Some people just weren't going to be face-to-face, and we learned how to deal with that. And so one of my most active and involved and longest-running players had moved from the lovely area of Chicago, as I'm looking around right now and looking at dandelions, moved from Chicago all the way down into the far south of the U.S. So they obviously weren't going to be coming back on a monthly basis to play my campaign game. So they asked if I could figure out some sort of a remote option. Now, I'm blessed that I have a finished basement, and I have a couple of banquet tables shoved together, and I got a nice tablecloth across it, and it seats about 8 comfortably, 10 a little squished together, but it's a pretty big table. And so what I did was I took a older laptop, I put it at the far end of the table across from me. I have a nice Yeti microphone that I had used when I was podcasting and making my podcasts at home. And I also have a Logitech C920 webcam. It's a fairly decent webcam. It's a little old, a little dated. It's probably about 3 years old. And so I set all that up, did a quick technology test with my user, or my player, and made sure that everything connected, that they could hear me, that they could see me. And we tried playing so that they were at one end of the table. The screen was maximized, so we could see their face. They could definitely see me and the players sitting close to me. Unfortunately, the C920 isn't a wide-angle webcam, so they couldn't see the entire table. I tried using some software to see if I could fix the view. I really couldn't. The best I could do was forcing Zoom into a high definition, high def input, and it seemed to show a little bit more, not much, but it did seem to help. So we did that. During the game, we pulled the microphone a little bit more towards the center of the table so that way they could hear everyone. And it seemed to go okay. I tried to make it so that we definitely included them. Made sure that, if we were talking, that we weren't trying to talk over each other. And it seemed to go okay. They felt like they could participate and be a part of the discussion. they did their dice rolls. I trust them. We're all adults. I've been playing online games for a while, and some people do the online so everyone can see. Some people do, hey, if you got a set of dice at home, go ahead and roll it. If I didn't trust these people, I wouldn't play with them. And so, I trusted their rolls. And if it was ever anything when, I could always make the roll myself and tell them what happened. But we didn't need to. It was all good. And that seemed to go fine. They seemed to be able to hear okay. So we'll see what happens. We're going to push on to our next games and include them remotely. And so, I'll let you know how it goes. But thank you for those of you who wrote to my blog or commented on Reddit. I posted to the OSR subreddit about this issue and got some nice feedback. And thanks to my players on my Discord server who also contributed. I took it all into account. And interesting, it was about 50-50 in terms of people that had good experiences with including someone remote into their face-to-face game, and 50% who struggled and said it really didn't work. So I don't know yet. The results are encouraging, but we'll see what happens in the future. So that was the session 0, if you will, or session 0 restart that happened. It went well. The final thing, for those of you who were curious, you might remember a couple of years ago I talked about how I included war games into my campaign. And when I had left my campaign off, there was a very serious bit that needed to happen in the war games portion of my campaign. For those of you that might be new listening, my campaign world has 3 separate games in it. I have a tabletop, face-to-face. I have an online game that we meet every 2 weeks, and I have a play-by-post online game that's been ongoing for 7 years now. All 3 are quote-unquote concurrent. I also have a war games campaign going on in my campaign world, to where there are armies marching about doing battle, and things that the players do in my campaign can affect those battles, and vice versa. The battles and the marching of the armies and the outcomes of those battles very definitely do affect what my players experience in my game. So much like everything else, when I dropped everything as a result of the pandemic 2 years ago, those war game battles were kind of put on hold. And so now I'm having to, again, pick up where I left off. Fortunately, I did keep good notes from my war games campaign. I know turn by turn what the major armies had been doing, why they had been doing it. And I had I have a war games tool that I downloaded from the internet called Birthier. I've mentioned Birthier in previous episodes and linked to it as well. So if you want to go and grab that, you can. And I was kind of able to pick up where I left off. But unfortunately, I have to advance through, I want to say, almost 7 to 10 turns in my war game, and resolve any potential conflicts to catch up to where the players will be restarting. And it looks like that there's going to be some interesting activity. Where the game left off, my tabletop players had been involved with, we'll call it religious intrigue. There was a faction of the major religion in my campaign that had broken off. These were an extremely conservative and very intolerant splinter of the religion. But they had declared open rebellion against the duchy that the players are in. And so the Duke set his armies to march to the rebelling cities and towns. And that's where everything kind of left off. So now I have to resolve that rebellion. And so I've had to go and find a simple but fun to me set of siege rules to resolve the siege and or conflict. And of course, like anything else, the dice like to tell a fun story, and so the dice told me that, hey, guess what? At the same time that the Duke is marching his militias and mercenary companies off to suppress a rebellion, well, the orcs have decided to get all feisty and go marching to war themselves. And nothing says, oh crap, I'm in trouble, like having to fight a war on two fronts. You can certainly ask the Russians that right now, as they've tried to engage in war on multiple axes in Ukraine, and unless you have your act together, it's not really a really good time for anyone. So, this is going to have to happen, and I'm busy resolving where everything is at. I'm probably going to have to use the war game Hordes of the Things to resolve the actual combats, and who knows what the players are going to end up to. They indicated that they're going to go back to their home base of Enonia, which is the center of where all of this stuff is happening. It would be really funny, well, not funny to them, but it would kind of be amusing to me if they came back and their poor home base was overrun by orcs. It is a possibility, and we'll have to see what happens. So I've got a couple of weeks before our next game engages, and we get back together and the players find out what I've come up with. So yeah, that's it. Plenty's afoot. Things are happening, and we'll see what goes on. All right, before we finish this episode, I wanted to give a quick thanks to Jason at Nerds RPG Variety Cast, to John at Red Dice Diaries, and to Daniel at Bandits Keep for your messages. Thanks, guys, for the support and for checking in and the words of encouragement. Daniel, I haven't listened to all the messages yet, so you might have some questions. I will check out the other messages, and if you got questions, I'll answer them in a future episode. All right, that's about it. And until next time, game on.